Good day, gentle viewers. In today's news, Anime Expo announcements, most of which are somewhat unhelpful, but there are a couple of goodies, including some upcoming anime announcements, and even an English-adapted visual novel. So without any further ado, I'm Tristan Gallant, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Let's jam. You know, I actually thought for a moment that waiting it out this week for some of the AX news to come out and settle a bit would have, left me with a whole bunch of very interesting announcements to cover. Hence why I didn't do a news video earlier this week. Turns out, though, that despite the new anime season already airing, the majority of AX news was about things in the far future with other seasons. Few announcements I found to be truly newsworthy for Western audiences, because most of us haven't heard of these series in the first place. Sans like a couple of major ones, which we will get to. And I mean, there were also a whole bunch of announcements that were just hyped a heck of a lot larger than they really needed to be. Like, Crunchyroll really wanted people to know this week that the One Piece dub is sailing onto Crunchyroll. Like, no duh, you're shutting down the Funimation website, its former home. Where do you think we expected it to go? Retro Crush? Shout out to Retro Crush, by the way. Great stuff on there from, around a similar time as One Piece, since that thing's getting closer and closer to 30 years on the air at this point. So, as what I should have expected, AX is largely not an event for like many pieces of interesting news and announcements, but rather a big social gathering that grants automatic FOMO to those unable to attend. But I found that there was one actually satisfying and useful announcement at AX this year, and that is the fact that Black Butler, of all things, is getting a new adaptation, which is real weird for me, because remember, only last week I touted my love for Spice and Wolf, and I mentioned how I covered the original anime of Spice and Wolf during my first year here on YouTube. Well, guess what was the topic of my first ever YouTube video? Freaking Black Butler. And now, here it is, coming back. Like, all I need now is for an announcement for a new Eden of the East or even a Death Note anime, and then I'm just gonna feel like my life is flashing before my eyes and just becoming full proof that time is circular, and all of these things will just continually come back again and again and again. So Black Butler is returning in anime form. For context, the series has had several anime adaptations before this. The original series was released in 2008. It had a second season in 2010, and then some OVAs and a film. Book of Circus, Book of Murder, and Book of the Atlantic that all came out between 2014 and 2017, respectively. It's been 6 years since we've seen any anime Black Butler related, and 9 since any of those anime have been released on television. But here we are. So what do we know? Well, unlike Spice and Wolf, which seems to be doing a readaptation of the same material, this new Black Butler has been stressed to not be a remake, but a new series following all of the rest. So if you haven't watched all of freaking Black Butler up till this point, get on that. They'll probably skip the second season. Personal recommendation there, you'll thank me. A bunch of staff is returning from the former Black Butler projects, but as far as companies are concerned, this adaptation is now being handled over at Cloverworks instead of the anime's former production home of A1 Pictures. Though considering that Cloverworks is an offshoot of A1, this isn't actually all that surprising, depending on where staff ended up after that split. We don't know what material this new series will cover, as the manga has been ongoing since 2006 and is still progressing. It might even end up doing its own thing, for all we know. The announcement was mostly just, hey, this exists, but also be prepared to wait, as it has a 2024 release date. And that means it could come out in January, it could come out in October of 2024. We just don't know. Am I excited? I mean, a bit. The series has always been a bit of a nostalgia bomb for me, considering its history with my YouTube channel, but its quality as a piece of entertainment has kind of risen and fallen for me over the years. And to be honest, I never even had the motivation to get around to watching the 2017 film. So maybe this will get me to do that. Now, before we continue, I did want to give quick shoutouts to supporters of this channel over on Patreon, because yes, this video is not sponsored, and the more support that we get over there, the less sponsors the Glass Reflection will need at any given time. So an immense thank you especially to patrons like Ryvan Bonaparte, Ross Emerson, Omar Shoman, Sailor Arashi, Hector Montemayor, Wago 221, City Yamako, and Lord Drez. We can't continue this without your support, so however much you are able to help, I am eternally grateful. Moving on to another anime announcement as of late that I feel makes even less sense. DC Comics has announced a new anime in collaboration with Wit Studio titled Suicide Squad Isekai. And, well, I mean, from what we can tell about the project, it is exactly what it says on the tin. There was an accompanying trailer that sees famous DC villain duo Harley Quinn and the Joker doing their regular thing, but then flashing forward to them being in a traditional fantasy setting. For some reason. I mean, for a long time, people have been kind of lamenting the isekai genre and its impact on things, but as much as I do actually enjoy the genre quite heavily, I can also agree that there comes a point when things are a little bit ridiculous. Suicide Squad Isekai really does seem like I stumbled upon a fanfiction page rather than an announcement for an upcoming anime. On top of which, the trailer makes it feel like this is just more of Harley Quinn Isekai rather than Suicide Squad. Do they know that Suicide Squad is more than just Harley and the Joker by extension? Or did this trailer just focus on that because she is the most recognizable of the group? Details beyond this are slim. We only know that it exists. We don't know what the actual plot is going to be beyond the insane premise of DC villains in a fantasy setting. We don't even know when it is going to come out. Like, the trailer kind of makes it seem like they are decently far along in production, but they didn't even commit to a 2024 release in this announcement. So who knows? I am fascinated by this purely for the WTF factor. Like, I am not actually interested in watching this, as I haven't really been all that interested in the variety of DC anime that have come out over the years. Like, I can acknowledge the shock value of this announcement. It certainly is not something that I think anyone expected. But as far as being actually interested in this and hopeful that it'll be entertaining, well, I mean, that's all up in the air. We can be hopeful, but I'm personally not going to get my hopes up anytime soon. Now, George Wada of Wit Studio is on record, however, as saying that if this anime is successful, they plan on having other DC projects in the future. And I mean, that's always kind of a red flag for me. Never say that you have plans for an untested thing to have continuations if it is successful. This is like the equivalent of them saying that they already have like 6 seasons in a movie already planned out and they just need this first show to do well. Don't do that. Release it first, and then if it's successful, you can announce that you had all of these plans. Like, anytime someone comes and tells us in advance of how prepared they are for a project to do well, inevitably it just leads to that project doing poorly. Maybe that won't happen in this case, but statistically, I feel it is quite likely. The last piece of news that I wanted to cover for today that came out of AX is that Aniplex and Type Moon have announced that the famous first visual novel from the Type Moon group, Tsukihime, will be arriving in English for the first time. Specifically, not the original Tsukihime visual novel, but rather its remake, A Piece of the Blue Glass Moon. This is significant because historically, Type Moon has given approximately 0 shits about its English fanbase, despite the massive size of said fanbase following the popularity booms of its Fate Stay Night franchise. Grand Order, for example, has made them millions of dollars, and yet no one has even bothered to release the original Fate Stay Night visual novel here in the West. It's unfortunate, but perhaps this is now the slow path to change. Not long ago, Type Moon released Witch of the Holy Night in English, that being the first ever visual novel made by Type Moon's creative team, like even before Type Moon existed. And now with the Tsukihime remake getting an English localization, who knows what that could mean for Type Moon products going forward. I won't go so far as to say that its success will lead to other releases, like an English release of Garden of Sinners, or heck, even Fate Stay Night in English, because, well, one of the apparent requirements thus far has been that it's a remake that they release. Witch of the Holy Night was itself a remake of the original visual novel, and Piece of the Blue Glass Moon is also a remake, so that makes the remake part of it a pretty hard requirement. So we would first need Type Moon to decide to do remakes of like their entire catalog first, which honestly, while that may happen, I do hope that they actually plan on making new content instead of just relying on all the stuff that they released in the early 2000s and calling it a day. The English version of Tsukihime is set to release in, you guessed it, 2024, because we've basically written off 2023 now as a year where anything interesting will happen anymore, despite, us still having the whole half of the year to go. As far as platforms go, this visual novel will be coming out on the PS4 and Switch, which is a little interesting because, I wasn't expecting them to say that a PS5 version of this game was going to come out in English first, but it still surprises me that it's never happened because, the PS5 has been out since 2020, even before the Japanese release of the Tsukihime thing, and they just never bothered with it, even in Japan. Sorry, PS5. Maybe things would have been different if scalpers didn't hog the shit out of your release and make it very difficult for the average person to grab you at a reasonable price. I am, yes, talking about me. And that's it for our show today. So subscribe if you haven't, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, whenever that may be, watch more anime and stay frosty.